Hello everyone, this is Nitpicking Nerd, and today I want to talk about movies that inspired Breaking Bad, which is one of my all-time favorite TV shows, and there are a few movies which I think probably inspired the elements in this show, and some of them I think the creators of Breaking Bad even admitted that they got inspired by. The best example is probably the movie Scarface, which was about Al Pacino's character Tony as he was rising to the top of a crime empire and his eventual downfall. That movie had a lot of little similarities to Breaking Bad. By the way, a lot of the actors who played in that movie also appeared in Breaking Bad. And I think even a scene of that movie was played on TV in one of the episodes of Breaking Bad, so that was probably a nod to that movie. And I think there are a lot of other examples of movies which probably also inspired it, such as the movie Falling Down, which was about a nerdy guy who kind of loses it. He snaps and starts doing crazy stuff and becomes a criminal basically, and by the end of the movie he's kind of the bad guy. And it was all done with a lot of humor, so elements of that also reminds me of Breaking Bad. And also the movie Fargo also had similar elements. It was also about a normal nerdy guy who wants to do something illegal to get some money, but things go out of control. It all goes way darker than he wanted to. And that movie also had other characters of criminals who were kind of funny, they were kind of strange. And the movie had like a dark comedy, a lot of little moments which were funny. Even some gory scenes which otherwise would be horrifying, but they were made in a funny way, like that final scene of one of those criminals getting rid of the body of one of the other ones, and it was shown very graphically, which would normally be horrifying, but it was done kind of in a funny way, so that reminds me of the style of Breaking Bad, especially in the early seasons when horrible things were done in a funny way that made it funny, like all those scenes of Walter and Jesse getting rid of bodies with melting them down with acid, but things go wrong and it's all kind of becomes a comedy almost, even though it's also horrifying at the same way. And so that really reminds me of the movie Fargo. I also liked how a lot of the characters in that movie were clever, like that lady detective who was chasing all the clues and figuring things out in a clever way. And also all the minor characters in that movie had their own little quirks and personality traits, like you could describe each of those minor characters in detail. And it reminds me of the way the characters were done on Breaking Bad. Every even small character had something that is memorable, something distinctive. So there was a lot of attention to detail and also a lot of humor, as I said, in that movie in Fargo. And even little things in the plot, like what happened with all that money that one of those bad guys buried somewhere out in the field, and then no one ever found that money because he was killed by his partner. So that kind of reminds me of the ending of Breaking Bad, in which most of that money remained lost to everyone, no one ever got it. And so that also kind of plays into that whole message of the movie or the series, which is that all of this was probably not worth it, that you only got yourself into trouble for nothing out of greed and all of that. That message was probably better in Fargo. I think in Breaking Bad there was that little victory that Walter had in the very end, because he did manage to get some of the money to his family, and so it wasn't a total failure on his part. Also, the way things were shown in Fargo also reminds me of Breaking Bad, the way everything was filmed. Sometimes it was like shot from a distance or from a strange angle and all kinds of interesting camera angles. And the final movie I want to talk about and compare with the show is the movie Lord of War with Nicolas Cage. And I actually watched this movie a long time ago before I ever watched Breaking Bad, and so it never occurred to me until I rewatched this movie. And then I suddenly noticed a whole bunch of similarities, and this movie came out before, so most likely it also inspired the show. So in this video I want to focus on this movie, and I'm going to go over all the things that remind me of Breaking Bad. And I think this movie inspired not only Breaking Bad but also Better Call Saul, because the main hero of the movie, played by Nicolas Cage, is very similar to Saul Goodman, so that character might have been inspired by this movie as well. And similar to Walter White, who had kind of like a double identity, because he was being a family man and being a criminal at the same time, so he was kind of living a double life. But in this movie, that guy, Yuri Orlov, who's played by Nicolas Cage, he not only has a double identity, but he has multiple identities. He has that little storage unit where he goes to switch identities, and we can see that he has multiple different passports with different names, and constantly in the movie he's expanding his business in a kind of exponential growth, which also reminds me of Breaking Bad, the way Walter started out small but then gradually starts getting bigger and bigger until it reaches epic scales. So in this movie also he starts out small, he only sells a couple of guns to a few people, but then he starts expanding his business more and more and more until he starts selling weapons he got from the collapsed Soviet Union, and everything becomes kind of global scale. And even when he became almost a billionaire and he had all the money he would ever need, he still kept going, he couldn't stop, so that's also similar. And also, just like Walter had his Jesse, in this movie Yuri also has kind of his own Jesse in the form of his brother, Vitaly, played by Jared Leto. And he, similar to Jesse, is also kind of a junkie loser who messes everything all the time, just like Jesse did with Walter. And also similar to Jesse, he has morality, he has a conscience, and so that's also part of the reason he messes things up, especially toward the end. In the end of the movie Lord of War, he basically sabotages the business of his brother because he thinks it will lead to the death of people. And similarly, Jesse also kind of sabotages Walter White after a certain point. When he realizes innocent people get hurt and killed, he turns against Walter. So this also is a very similar character in the way that in the beginning they're kind of like the comic relief, kind of junkie loser, and then toward the end they are both kind of morality opposed to the things that their partner is doing, and that's why they turn against him. So they both turn against their partner for ethical reasons, basically, to save children and stuff. And in both the movie and the TV show there was somewhere in the middle, Yuri put his brother into rehab, and Walter also put Jesse into rehab. And then both of them come back clean, but then start messing things up for other reasons, for morality reasons, and so it's kind of funny how similar this is. Also, I think the main character of Yuri is very similar to Saul Goodman, the way that he always behaves like sort of a salesman, and he always uses humor to get out of tough situations, even life and death situations, he always kind of jokes around. In that way he kind of relieves the tension with the bad guys, so he reminds me a lot of Saul Goodman. And the main villain in the movie is a dictator who kind of reminds me of both Tuco and Gustavo Fring together. Gustavo was also kind of like a dictator in many ways, but Tuco was kind of a more crazy, unpredictable villain, and so I think the villain in this movie is kind of a combination of both of them. So he's both a clever dictator and a businessman, but also a little bit kind of crazy, off the rails, unpredictable, like Tuco, so it's possible this character might have inspired both of those villains in Breaking Bad. If you combine Tuco with Gustavo together, then you get this guy, basically. And also all across that movie there's that Interpol agent who keeps chasing him around, so that's kind of like the Hank of that movie, even though he has no direct connection to him on a personal level. And also the whole visual style of the movie, the way everything is shot, all the transition shots, the way they show us the passage of time, it's very similar to a lot of the transition shots in Breaking Bad. There's even a scene of that Interpol agent digging through the trash to find some documents, some evidence, and he found some shredded papers, and then he painstakingly combines them back together. And there was a very similar scene in Better Call Saul when Saul Goodman took some shredded paper out of the garbage and then put it all back together to find the evidence he needed. So the main character in the movie, Yuri, is kind of like a mix between Saul Goodman and Walter White. He's always dressed in a suit, just like Saul Goodman. He always uses humor to diffuse the situations he's in. He kind of plays himself overconfident, and he also has similar flaws, like he becomes obsessed, he's unable to stop. Even though he has enough money for a lifetime, he still continues to do what he does best. And when someone asks him why, he says it's because he's good at it. So that was a very similar dialogue to Breaking Bad. So as you see, there are a lot of similarities, and I don't think it's a coincidence. This movie came out in 2005 and Breaking Bad came out in 2008. So it's very likely that they took some inspiration from this movie. And let me know in the comments, what do you think about all of this? Do you think this movie and the other ones I mentioned, did they really inspire Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul, or is it all just a coincidence? Let me know in the comments what you think and we can discuss it, and I will see you all next time. Bye bye.